Hey gang, welcome to Dr. Frank's Finance World. I am Dr. Frank, the bank, where I teach you finance and try to give you information to help you make more money. Today we are entering the world of Bollinger Bands. Pretty cool stuff. I use it a lot in a lot of different things that I do. And so here we go. Let's get started. So basically, when you talk about Bollinger Bands, yeah. Oh, that's right. Be sure to subscribe and do notifications, if you will, if you want to look at more stuff in the future. There's actually 4 parts of this, so you might want to get the others with notifications. Look in the notes for links and websites. It becomes more important as we go to different places. And then check out the books in our bookstore. There's some really excellent books related to Bollinger Bands. So big picture, what are Bollinger Bands? How are they intended to work? And what is regression to the mean? So Bollinger Bands were created by a guy named John Bollinger. I had looked at this stuff when I was at Texas Tech and didn't know what it was called. There was no internet back then, so if you didn't run into it, you didn't run into it. But pretty interesting guy. And what he does is he utilizes math, which I like, to find a moving average and then build channels around the moving average to see when it looks like it might be appeared to heading towards the top of a normal or a normal distribution, really, a valuation, 2 standard deviations, or towards the bottom of a movement of 2 standard deviations. So it is very dependent on a moving average. And there's a lot of debate about what is the best moving average. I will talk about what has worked best for me. I've done a lot of research on the side related to this. I'll just save you the drama. It's 30 days or units when you're looking at it. Over the longer term, it would be days. But the channels that it builds and the midpoint is based on a 30-day moving average to see when it's higher or lower. The number of days actually can be quite different. I've seen different programs use different ones. When you naturally pull it up on FinViz, or you go to particularly Yahoo Finance when you go free, a lot of them will pull up a 20-day moving average, and that works okay, but realistically a 30-day one moves better. So the time period can vary quite a bit too. One of the videos as part of this deals with meme stocks and the possibility of day trading them. And so basically the time period you use, whether it's days or hours or minutes, sort of shortens or expands the period of time that it's looking at. For the longer term stuff that I do for stocks and mutual funds and that kind of stuff, I use days. But when I get into day trading, I actually use minutes. So it does rely on something called regression to the mean. And this concept is pretty simple. It's kind of a repeat of what I say is the science of the world and how finance relates to that. Essentially, if you looked at people's shoe size, for men, it centers up. The top part of the distribution is most men wear about a 10 or a 10 and a half. Goes all the way down to pretty low and all the way up to 17, 18, 19 for the gigantic guys. And size is another thing that is typically normally distributed. You know, you don't find too many 8-foot people, 9, 10-foot don't even exist. Partly because the population tends to center up around about a 5 foot 10-inch guy here in the United States. Over in Europe and some countries it's a little over 6 feet. But the bottom line is, when something gets too far out of whack on a regression, in theory it starts to come back towards the mean, and when it gets too far on the low side, it tends to come back towards the mean. And the question is, does that work? We'll talk about that. It is a mathematical relationship using trend data and something called the empirical rule, normal distribution. So what is the empirical rule? You've seen it when you're in school, so don't fall asleep on me here. We're talking about statistics, but basically is a mathematical relationship that talks about a standard deviation over a period of time. And when you look at observations within a normal distribution, which is what the empirical rule is based on, about 68% of them fall plus or minus 1 standard deviation. 95 plus or minus 2, and 99.7 plus or minus 3. So when I was originally looking at investing, it just made logical sense to me, if you will, that if I wanted to buy low, which is over on this end of the curve, and I wanted to sell high, which is over on this end of the curve, I would want to use some type of normal distribution. It's the most common one in nature as well. So basically, if 95% of them fall plus or minus 2, then 2.5% of the time they're falling down here on the low end and 2.5% on the high end. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could buy in the lowest 2.5% of the observations and sell on the highest 2.5% of the observations? And that's sort of the general idea. Interestingly, when I looked at Bollinger Bands, I was never looking for an absolute buy or sell signal. I was looking for, hey, it's relatively cheap or it's relatively expensive. But it kind of morphed into this, and we'll talk about that too. When you look at it from a graphing standpoint, however, it actually looks a lot like this, where you have the distribution turned on its side, and the lower channel part of the graph, if you will, is a 2 standard deviation move from the mean, and the upper end of the graph or the chart is actually a 2 standard deviation above the mean. So I will pull up Bollinger Bands soon enough, but that's the basic premise behind, is when it falls below 2.5 standard deviations, you would buy it. Above 2 standard deviations, you would sell it. So they can basically do form channels around recent price movement, and that's why it's, whether it's 20 days or 30 days or 50 days, it's pretty much up to you. But it is best seen visually, graphically. So you can go to Yahoo Finance. You can go to stock charts. That's my favorite when I go look this stuff up. You can also use part of FinViz, which is another neat place we'll go to do some of the charting, although it's not as exact, neither is Yahoo, as you will see in stock charts. Ultimately, when you look at Bollinger Bands, the book that I would recommend is the guy who first created them, John Bollinger, way back in the 80s, and it's Bollinger on Bollinger Bands. This is an example I sort of told you in previous videos of, there's some great information in there, and then they kind of head out into space on some of this kind of stuff. And he talks about channels being thinner and thicker, and this is what it means, and that and the other, and goes a little nuts on it if you ask me. But ultimately, some very good information. It's always best to get it from the source, right? So what does research say? If you go to the Springer article, open article here, and look it up, you will see that it is actually the examination of the profitability of technical analysis based on moving average strategies, which is what Bollinger Bands are, in the BRICS country, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and they added South Africa as the S part of that. But in this paper, they investigate the profitability of it in those stock markets. In addition, search for evidence that technical analysis and fundamental analysis can complement each other in these markets. To implement it, they looked at a comprehensive portfolio containing assets traded in those markets. They developed an automated trading system, which is, when I tell you what I use in the next video, that becomes an automated trading system. In other words, it's a dummy buy here, sell there kind of process out there that simulated transactions using technical analysis. Our assessment updated the findings of previous research. Our research showed that the returns obtained by the automated system on average exceeded the value invested, so you made money. As a matter of fact, there were groups of assets for each country that performed well above the portfolio average of the country itself, surpassing the returns obtained using buy and hold strategy. So you find these little nuggets of research out there that show, kind of depending on the situation and the time period they were looking at, maybe there's something to it. The returns were very strong in Russia and India. We also found that technical analysis can help fundamental analysis identify the most dynamic companies in the stock market. So interesting information there. Anyway, so the strategy tip that I'm going to leave for you is go to stock charts, start to play on it. It's free, at least one part of it is, and then figure out how to use the program and play with the number of days. That's exactly what we will work on in the next video. So please don't forget to send me emails with comments and suggestions. Check out the bookstore for John Bollinger's book, and I look forward to getting into the channels and the charts in part 2 of Bollinger Bands. Have a great day. Appreciate you. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.